I knew something was off when I walked into the break room and found my favorite mug, my Do I Look Like I Care? Mug, cracked in two and stuffed in the trash like a murder victim someone wanted to bury without a funeral. That mug had survived 2 office remodels, 3 CFOs, and 1 small kitchen fire, but apparently not Kaitlyn. New HR head, fresh off her LinkedIn rebranding spree, with her acrylic nails clicking like a metronome of impending doom. She called me Marla with the legacy knowledge like it was a slur. You don't last 20 years in operations without learning to read rooms the way a poker player reads faces. And something in the building had shifted, like the air went stale the minute she walked in with her culture realignment bullet points and unblinking eye contact. She thought we were a sitcom, and she'd been hired to kill off the old characters in season 5. Let me pause here for 1 second since I've got your attention. If you're listening to this and not subscribed, come on, 90% of you are ghosting me like corporate during budget season. Hit that subscribe button, tap the like. It keeps our little team fueled with caffeine and spite. Now, back to the slow motion car crash that was Kaitlyn's idea of people management. She started small, removed the candy jar from reception, banned desk plants, rewrote the PTO policy in Comic Sans and called it fun. But her real campaign was less about succulence and more about pruning the salary-heavy folks who didn't post inspirational quotes on Slack. I was a prime target, too old to be trendy, too experienced to be cheap, and too steady to need micromanaging, which made me invisible until I wasn't. I'd been at that company longer than most of our software licenses. I onboarded my first project back when cloud was still a weather report. I'd outlasted every VP who ever tried to revamp ops. My job wasn't flashy, but it kept the wheels turning. Contracts reviewed, vendors paid, fire drills that didn't turn into infernos because I handled the tiny sparks before anyone smelled smoke. But there's no metric for quiet competence, no award for never dropping a ball. Kaitlyn didn't understand people like me. She wanted unicorns, hungry, young, overly caffeinated, willing to cry on TikTok about hustle culture. I was a fossil, according to her hallway whisperers, reliable but outdated, like a fax machine that still worked too well to throw out but embarrassed you in meetings. She started canceling my recurring check-ins, redirected approvals through newer hires who couldn't tell an invoice from a menu. Meetings got scheduled accidentally without me. I stopped correcting people when they got things wrong in group emails, let them swing in the breeze a little. Nothing malicious. Just stopped being the safety net they didn't know they had. Then one Tuesday, as I was saving the day for the third time before lunch, this time untangling a client access issue caused by a junior dev pushing code to production without change control, I noticed something. Kaitlyn watching me from across the hall like she was checking a list. And suddenly I knew. This wasn't about performance, it was about optics. They wanted to look lean. Agile, younger, I'd seen it before. Never thought I'd be the headline. But here's the funny thing about being invisible, you hear everything. And I'd been listening, collecting, saving, not for revenge, not at first. Just because some part of me always knew that one day, someone would mistake silence for weakness. And when that day came, I'd be ready. It was 9:04 a.m. on a Thursday when Kaitlyn summoned me with a chirpy calendar invite titled, Touchpoint 15 Mins. The smiley face felt like an insult before I even clicked. I walked in to find her already seated in the HR conference room, windowless, sterile, smelling like fresh laminate and whatever perfume she marinates in that makes your eyes sting. On the table sat a cardboard box, standard issue, brown, empty. Beside it, a single piece of paper flipped face down. I didn't sit. Kaitlyn folded her hands with performative empathy, like a pastor about to read a eulogy for someone she never liked. Marla, she began, in that overly rounded voice people use with toddlers and temp workers, undergoing some realignment in the org structure. Leadership's making bold moves toward future-facing operations, and unfortunately, your position is no longer aligned with our strategic priorities. Translation: we want younger, cheaper, and louder. She slid the paper across the table like she was dealing a poker card she knew would ruin me. The letter was printed on letterhead so generic it looked like it had been downloaded from a template site. Dear Marla, due to restructuring, we regret to inform you blah blah blah. Severance details in fine print, a hotline number in case I needed to process emotions. I stared at it a moment, then tapped the paper once with my index finger. Is this final? Kaitlyn leaned back in her chair, her smirk as smug as a cat in a birdcage. Very, that was the moment. The one they'd all dissect later. How I didn't flinch, didn't argue, didn't cry, shout, ask for reconsideration. I just nodded once slowly, like someone finishing the last page of a book they already knew the ending to. Picked up the box, left the letter behind, and walked out without a single word. But silence in the right mouth can sound like a war drum. And mine echoed, people noticed. Heads peeked out of cubicles. Eyes darted toward me as I passed. A few stood halfway, as if about to speak, then thought better of it. I didn't look at any of them. I just walked that stupid box down the hallway like it held something sacred, instead of 20 years of corporate indifference. Inside the elevator, I stared at the panel, my reflection flickering in the mirrored walls. Kaitlyn thought she'd won, that she'd just checked a box on some spreadsheet titled Legacy Elimination. But here's the thing about spreadsheets, they don't account for consequences. They don't see what's been buried in a drawer for 2 decades, waiting for its resurrection. By the time the elevator doors opened, I had already begun building a plan in my head. Not from spite, from protocol. The same protocol I used to save their asses 100 times over when systems failed, or contracts went sideways, or compliance flagged an issue 3 hours before a deadline. I was always calm, always careful, always prepared. The sunlight hit me as I stepped outside. It felt fake, like the kind of warm they pump into Vegas casinos to trick your circadian rhythm. I walked to my car, parked in the exact same spot I'd parked in since before Kaitlyn was out of college. Set the box on the passenger seat, sat, closed the door. Then I exhaled, just once, and pulled out my phone. There was a folder in my cloud drive, titled plainly in case of emergency. No emojis, no fluff, just decades of receipts, scans, email chains, and one very specific document from 2004. My original contract, signed in ink, before the company had an app, before anyone gave a damn about future-facing anything. I opened it, scrolled, and found the clause, the one I had highlighted, printed, and saved not once but 3 separate times over the years. Because I knew someday, someone younger and dumber would think they could erase me without reading the fine print. The air in the car was still thick with that artificial lemon scent from the air freshener I kept meaning to replace. I sat there, hands steady on the steering wheel, like I was about to merge onto a highway instead of detonate a quiet little bomb. The box was next to me on the seat, its weight disproportionate to what it held, one stapler, a photo of my dog in a Halloween costume, a dried-out highlighter, and a USB I hadn't used since the Bush administration. Still, it felt heavier than most things I'd carried out of that building. Maybe because it wasn't the weight of things, but of endings. I didn't cry, I didn't shake. I just reached into my purse, pulled out my tablet, and tapped in the password I hadn't changed in 17 years. The name of my first boss and the code of the old copier that jammed every Monday. Muscle memory did the rest. Dropbox, folder, in case of emergency. There it was, the file. Employment Contract 2004, MHPDF, the clause lived on page 17. I remembered it like a birth date, buried under legalese, wrapped in company jargon, but real. It had taken 3 meetings and one very irritated junior attorney back then to get it added. "This is excessive," he'd said. "Nobody gets terminated after 15 years without warning." I'd smiled and said, "Good. Then it won't cost you anything." I scrolled to the line that mattered. In the event of involuntary termination after 15 years of continuous service, all remaining equity shall vest immediately at market value on date of termination. Simple, elegant, brutal, 15 years. I'd given them 20. And the current market value? Let's just say the company's stock had gone from startup gamble to CNBC darling over the last 5 years. We were soaring, which meant so was my equity, most of it unvested by design, until now. I composed the email to James, my lawyer of 15 years. The subject line, "Need you to read this carefully, terminated today." No caps, no panic, just the file attached in a single sentence, see page 17. Termination was today at 9:07 a.m. Let me know next steps. Click, send. Then I set the tablet down, leaned back, and waited. The sky outside had gone flat gray, like the world was holding its breath with me. Exactly 7 minutes later, my tablet chimed. New email. Subject, need you to read this carefully, terminated today, and the first words made me smile in a way I hadn't all week. Well, well, well. He'd attached the contract again, highlighted, annotated, legal citations included for flavor, and copied both the general counsel's office and the CFO's assistant, since Kaitlyn's contact was conveniently absent from the public org chart. His message, short and deadly. "Dear Marla, as per the attached original contract, still in effect, legally binding, and now actionable, your involuntary termination as of 9:07 a.m. today activates Clause 17(b), triggering immediate acceleration of all unvested equity. Given current share prices, estimated payout exceeds $10.2 m. Please advise if they request negotiation. Best, James, and right below that, the recipient list." They'd all seen it now, no fanfare, no vengeance speech, just clean execution. I didn't feel powerful, I felt precise. They'd swung the axe, I'd built the floorboards out of steel, and now they were falling through it. My phone rang before I even left the parking lot, not a text, not an email, a call. Caller ID, Richard Heller, CFO. He and I had maybe spoken 4 times in as many years. The kind of man who spoke in acronyms and budget cycles, always with one AirPod in and eyes on something more important than you. But now his name was lighting up my screen like a flare gun, and something about that made me laugh, quietly, bitterly. I let it ring twice before answering. Didn't rush, didn't clear my throat. "Marla," he said, and I could hear the panic in the edges of his voice like someone trying to whisper scream in a movie theater. Did you authorize that email from your lawyer?" I didn't answer immediately. I wanted him to sit with the question. I rolled my window halfway down, let the wind in. "I didn't authorize anything," I said. "I forwarded a document." He replied, But this clause, this payout, it wasn't flagged during your offboarding. We didn't budget for this, not this quarter. Not ever. I could practically hear him clicking through spreadsheets in his mind, watching numbers bleed red. That sounds like an internal issue, I replied flatly. There was a pause. I could hear muffled voices in the background, someone saying retroactive clause, another muttering what year was it signed. It sounded like a poker table where someone just realized they'd bet the company car on a pair of sevens. We need to talk through options, he tried, softer now. Maybe renegotiate. I'm sure you're reasonable. I didn't answer. I hung up, not because I was angry, because I didn't owe them air anymore. Within 10 minutes, I was getting alerts, LinkedIn views spiking, my name climbing the internal Slack feed under #finance updates, and 2 accidental BCCs from someone in compliance trying to verify if I had digitally signed anything more recent than 2004. I hadn't, on purpose. Then came the texts. Alex SR. DevOps, wait, they fired you? Melissa, legal of all people, you okay? Can't believe this. Thought you had ironclad status. Eddie Facilities, bless him. I just saw Kaitlyn run past my office like she was late for the Hunger Games. That about you? I didn't answer any of them. I just turned off the ringer and drove home with the windows down, the wind threading through my hair. My stupid cardboard box in the back seat rattling with every bump like it was clapping sarcastically. Back in my kitchen, I poured myself coffee, decaf, because my body doesn't do adrenaline anymore without a price, and sat at the table, tablet open, watching the email chain grow like a vine of corporate rot. Legal replied, predictably, trying to dismiss the clause as non-standard language. My lawyer responded by citing 3 precedent cases from the last 5 years and attached a notarized copy of the original signature page. Then HR tried to claim it had been superseded by ongoing performance reviews. We attached their own onboarding documentation from the last software switch, which showed no such thing. Kaitlyn's digital signature, approving the termination, was timestamped just 50 minutes before my meeting. That alone would cost them more than her salary. From where I sat, it all unfolded like a security camera on mute, frantic motion but no sound. No one spoke to me directly anymore. I was no longer a person. I was a line item, a fire, a cautionary tale waiting to go viral if they blinked wrong. They didn't understand what they'd done. Not just to me, but to themselves. Because while they were scrambling to find a way out, I was already watching the walls shift. Vendors stalling, payment approvals held up, a client emailing to say they hadn't received onboarding docs for a new integration, and somewhere in the background, a project tracker blinking yellow on a system I used to maintain solo. It wasn't sabotage, it was gravity. You pull the wrong beam out of a building, the creak you hear next isn't vengeance, it's structure, collapsing. By Friday morning, less than 48 hours after Kaitlyn boxed me out like yesterday's office daker, the systems began to shudder. It started with a payment freeze. Vendor invoice batch #11294A didn't go through. Then #11295B bounced back with an error. Missing compliance ID. I know because Dana from Accounts Payable texted me at 7:14 a.m. with a screenshot and a simple "Did you archive the backend on these?" No, I didn't. But no one else knew how to renew the tokens embedded in the payment workflows, the ones I'd manually patched 3 quarters ago when the procurement API bugged out during a holiday release. Those tokens expired at midnight on the last day of each fiscal month. It was now August 1st. By noon, 2 client accounts had flagged our team for failure to provide contractual documentation with an SLA. That was code for, "Hey, where's the thing we paid you for?" That documentation lived in a shared drive that I maintained. I had labeled everything with idiot-proof tags, but Kaitlyn had removed my access before IT could archive my shared folders. Now half of those directories were 404 errors, or jumbled into the recycle bin by someone named Brad Intern. But it wasn't just technical rot setting in. At 2:07 p.m., a junior analyst, Nico, barely out of undergrad, forwarded a file to internal legal with the subject line, "Is this real?" The attachment? A compliance risk report I'd written last year, flagged urgent. It detailed an employee classification discrepancy. Dozens of full-time workers labeled as 1,099 contractors to dodge benefits, at HR's own request. The report had been read, marked as reviewed no action, and buried by, you guessed it, Kaitlyn. And now Nico, poor sweet Nico, had stumbled upon it while running an audit trail on onboarding inconsistencies. Because Kaitlyn, in her infinite wisdom, tasked the interns with learning systems through deep dives. Well, he dove and hit the mines. My lawyer James called me that evening. No emails, just voice. "You could leak it," he said, tone smooth like he was suggesting tea instead of nuclear escalation. "But I recommend we let them sweat. Every day that passes with that payout on the books and no resolution puts more pressure on the board. They'll catch up. Let it simmer." I didn't say much, just listened, watching the email count tick up in my inbox. Former coworkers checking in, some asking questions, others just sending emojis, bombs, popcorn flames. People I hadn't heard from in years were suddenly so sorry to hear and shocked and didn't see it coming. No one ever does. That's the point of silent scaffolding. You only notice it once it's gone. I hadn't opened LinkedIn in months. I did now. 173 connection requests, 9 recruiters, 3 just checking in messages from people who'd once tried to edge me out of a promotion. And Kaitlyn? She'd gone radio silent, probably tucked in a war room somewhere with legal, trying to invent a time machine or a clause that could save her from the glacier slowly sliding toward her desk. But nothing could outrun the paperwork. The equity clause was airtight. Her signature was time-stamped. And the misclassification report, that was now a legal landmine buried in a system I'd built, and they'd forgotten to map. I made tea, sat by the window, watched the late summer light bend across my lawn. They thought I was done, but I had just begun. It was Sunday morning when Kaitlyn finally caved. She called at 8:32 a.m., voice thick with that forced cheeriness corporate folks use when they know they've stepped in it but still think a smiley tone can mop it up. "Hi, Marla. Just wanted to reach out personally," she began, stretching the word personally like a yoga band about to snap. "We really value everything you've contributed to the company, and I'd love to offer a little goodwill gesture, just to help ease the transition." Translation: "We're desperate and hoping you'll settle cheap." She launched into her pitch like she was reading off a pitch deck titled Operation Damage Control, that the company was prepared to offer $75,000 as a severance, plus a 3-month healthcare extension, and of course, this was her favorite part, a standard confidentiality agreement just to keep everything clean. That NDA was doing a lot of heavy lifting in her mind. I let her talk. Let her rehearse the lines legal probably fed her. Let her believe, for exactly 2 minutes and 42 seconds, that this was her olive branch moment, her triumphant save. Then I opened my email, found the last thread from James, my lawyer, and hit forward. Subject line unchanged, no body text, no commentary, just the entire chain intact, including the clause, the math, and the summary that made grown men in suits sweat through their ergonomic mesh chairs. I sent it while she was still talking. There was a pause mid-sentence. I imagined her eyes scanning it, the moment her voice caught, like she'd just swallowed something sharp. "Oh," she said, softer now. You're going that route." I didn't respond, I just waited. Silence again, doing more than words ever could. She tried to recover, but her confidence was leaking out of her like air from a pinprick balloon. "I mean, obviously we respect your legal rights, but I just thought, maybe we could resolve this amicably before it becomes messy." Too late, I thought, but I let her twist for a second longer before hanging up without a word. 10 minutes later, I got a text from one of the junior HR reps, Jamie. Bless her, poor thing never had a poker face in meetings. She just sent a screenshot, no caption. It was from the internal HR Slack, accidentally posted in the wrong channel. It showed Kaitlyn's name above a panicked message to the executive thread. "How did we miss this? This clause is a landmine. Legal said her original contract was standardized. Who approved this?" A few messages below it. "CFO Rich, this isn't a landmine, it's a dam crater. GC Allen, we can't void it, it's enforceable. Her lawyer's a shark." Then the kicker from someone just listed as exec ops: "Paula, if this goes public, we're toast." Her clause isn't the only one from that era. There are 6 others. I stared at the image for a long moment, then let out a laugh, short, sharp, too loud for a quiet Sunday morning. Scared the cat off the windowsill. It was the sound of inevitability catching up. They weren't trying to save me now, they were trying to save themselves. And Kaitlyn, the woman who smirked when she slid that box across the table, she was unraveling, her grip slipping, her legacy already rotting before it was written. I brewed another cup of tea, watched the Slack screenshot again like it was an Oscar-nominated short film. There was a storm coming, not from me. I didn't need to swing. I just had to hold the line and let gravity do its work. By Monday morning, the whispers hit the top floor. It started with a calendar shift. The quarterly investor update, originally set for Tuesday afternoon, was suddenly marked tentative. That word, tentative, was the corporate equivalent of a fire alarm with the batteries ripped out. No explanation, just a quiet rearranging of chairs on a ship they all pretended wasn't sinking. I knew because someone in executive scheduling forwarded it to an old internal distro list I was still on. A mistake, I'm sure, or maybe not. Later that day, James texted me a single line. "They've escalated to the board. Your clause came up in audit." My clause. Funny how a forgotten paragraph in an ink smudge contract became a $10 million fracture line. But it wasn't just about the payout anymore. It was what that clause meant. If I had one, who else did? Suddenly, the thing they thought was a one-off oversight became a legal landmine field. And Kaitlyn had been the one to walk across it in heels, all because she wanted to impress someone with a spreadsheet and a body count. Inside the building, panic mutated into paranoia. I didn't have access anymore, of course, but that didn't stop the texts. "Tanya, corporate affairs? 3 VPs just requested HR polls from 2003-2008 hires. You started something. David, IT. Is it true your clause wasn't renegotiated? Asking for a friend with stock options. Monica, legal, now whispering. Some of the old guard are reviewing contracts. Word is you weren't the only one with accelerated vesting buried in legalese." I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't need to. What they were feeling now wasn't fear of me. It was fear of precedent. My silence became its own echo chamber. No interviews, no press, not even a social post. Just the knowledge that somewhere out there, the woman they called a relic, the one who left without a fight, was still watching, still waiting. And now they were doing my work for me, digging up the past with pale faces and trembling hands. The board convened on Wednesday behind closed doors. I imagine there was a PowerPoint. Probably some poor analyst stammering through a worst-case slide that showed my name in bold red and a line item labeled unaccounted equity liability $10,250,000, plus a bullet point that reads something like potential for cascade if similar clauses exist, because I wasn't just a glitch. I was proof that the old contracts mattered, that someone had seen the storm coming decades ago and built a lifeboat while everyone else was busy chasing buzzwords. Even more poetic, my clause had never been secret. It was there the whole time. They just stopped reading. Assumed tenure meant softness, that loyalty could be trimmed like fat. Now they knew better. Kaitlyn, for all her smug bravado, had gone quiet. The Slack channels I used to monitor were silent. No culture spotlights, no HR highlights, just a vacuum where her voice used to live. She wasn't the heroine of her own reorg story anymore. I was, not because I wanted the spotlight, but because I'd become the warning label no one wanted to read until the product exploded. Somewhere, deep in that building I helped hold together for 2 decades, contracts were being combed, highlighters uncapped, attorneys summoned, panic drafted into memos with titles like Legacy Compensation Exposure Phase 1. They didn't say my name out loud, but they didn't have to. I was the clause, and I hadn't even raised my voice. They say the worst sound in a boardroom isn't shouting. It's silence after someone drops a truth so heavy, no one wants to breathe wrong around it. According to someone who'd never dared text me from the 17th floor until now, that silence came just after the general counsel cleared his throat and said, the termination was executed without a compliance review. Kaitlyn bypassed the standard flagging protocol. A pause. Then the CEO, Michael, who once shook my hand at a holiday party without remembering I'd been running his backend ops since he was still CFO, slammed his palm on the table and shouted, she had one job, one process. But the thing about processes, they only work when people respect them. And Kaitlyn, she treated protocols like mood boards, nice to glance at, never to follow. The GC, cool as ever, simply slid a packet across the table. This is the timestamped digital chain of approval. You'll see Kaitlyn signed off. No compliance routing. No review, no audit. Right there in bold was her name and a big red checkmark next to the phrase ready to proceed, no exceptions noted. You could almost hear the gall in his voice when he said, had she followed proper steps, clause 17, B would have been flagged. Legal would have advised against termination without renegotiation. The boardroom fell into that stunned stillness that only happens when people realize they've been standing on a trapdoor, and the hinges are already groaning. And that's when the emails started. A partner firm, our second largest contract, sent a thinly veiled message expressing concern over recent personnel instability and lack of institutional continuity. Translation: we know you fired the glue holding the circus together, and now we don't trust your hands on the wheel. Investors caught wind almost instantly. One even posted in a shareholder forum, asking if the operational liabilities reported this quarter had anything to do with the sudden offboarding of the head of compliance architecture. Another flat out asked if the company was hiding severance-related expenses in its deferred cost reports. The cracks were no longer internal, they were public. And me? I was making chicken salad when James called again. They're scrambling, he said, amusement barely concealed. Board is furious. Kaitlyn's on thin ice, CEOs trying to frame it as an isolated HR mistake. But the documents don't lie. Your clause was in plain sight. Their own onboarding archive confirms it. I didn't say anything for a second. Just listened to the sizzling of the pan, tick of the gas stove. They're drafting an amended settlement proposal, he continued. I'll forward it when it lands. They trying to quiet it down, they're offering double, and waiving the NDA request, just to avoid the optics. Of course they were, because the silence that once empowered them now threatened them. It wasn't just about me anymore, it was about what I represented, the cost of arrogance. Price of underestimating the people who remember where the fuse box is hidden. No press release was issued, no apology made, but the shift was real. An internal memo went out to department heads. All terminations above pay grade level 9 now required board-side compliance review. Kaitlyn's name wasn't mentioned, but everyone knew. I'd become the ghost in the hallways, the clause in the contract. The lesson etched into process docs and emergency playbooks, all without lifting a single finger in retaliation. I didn't destroy them. I just let them walk straight into their own trap, blueprint in hand. The call came on a Wednesday, just before sunset. One of those golden hour moments where everything looks cinematic, sharp, and meaningful, like the final scenes already rolling whether you're ready or not. James answered first. I put him on speaker. We didn't bother with pleasantries. It was Richard, the CFO. His voice was quieter this time. Less of the bark, more of the breath. We've come to a resolution, he said, like the sentence hurt to say. He outlined the terms, double the original payout, full accelerated equity as previously established, and most notably no NDA. That's not typical, James replied coolly. It's strategic, Richard muttered. The board agreed it's cleaner this way, no gag order, no lawsuit, just closure. I could imagine them around that table, forced to admit defeat. Not because I screamed, not because I tweeted, but because I read the fine print better than they did. Kaitlyn resigned that morning. Not announced, just disappeared from the org chart like she'd never existed. Her exit was handled with a sterile thank you for your contributions email blast signed by someone in operations who'd never met her. I doubt she packed her own box. I told James to give them the go-ahead. He emailed over my acceptance, signed, time-stamped final, and just like that, the war ended with a signature. Mine. I stared at the screen for a moment after. No victory dance, no champagne, just silence, heavy, full, enough. I opened my old work inbox one last time, my access reinstated for 24 hours to transition files, though we all knew there was nothing left to transition. Most of my systems had already outlived the people who fired me. I typed one email, simple, clean. Subject, final note to ops team, finance, support, legal, and the few brave souls in compliance take care of the place. I won't be watching, but someone will. I hit send, then logged out, for good. Outside, the air had shifted. Leaves skittered across the pavement, brittle and sharp underfoot. The trees had turned without anyone noticing, like they always do, quiet, unstoppable, golden. I walked out into it. Contract sealed, payout secured, legacy intact. My badge was still in my pocket. I could have dropped it in the return bin by the reception desk, but I didn't. I kept walking. Past the building. Past the front lot where new hires still parked crooked. Past the space where my name had once been printed on a little plastic placard nobody dusted. As I crossed the street, my phone lit up. 17 unread messages, media inquiries, headhunters, 2 investor types asking if I'd be open to consulting on operational architecture for scale phase orgs. One even called me the compliance oracle. I turned the screen over, let the messages keep piling up. I didn't need to respond, because in the end, I didn't raise my voice. I just raised the cost of underestimating me, and they paid in full. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.